this video, we'll keep moving forward with the gold star query exercises that you can find on Blackboard. Our next question, write a SQL statement that will find all employees who have an average performance rating. Display last name and performance. So we have select last name, performance from just the employee table, where performance equals average. And that's our only criterion. Make sure that you have gold star specified as your default schema, or we could include gold star as the table name before each of the attribute names. So let's run this and see what results we get. And you can see that we have the last name and performance for all the employees where they have an average performance. If you only wanted to see the last name, we would just get rid of performance here. Again, I'm just going to comment the queries out. You should use the same procedure for your project. Our next query, write a SQL statement that will show all the employees that make $75,000 or more. So far, we're just concerned with one table still, but in this video, we're going to see some examples of what's called an implicit join, where we need more than one table in our from statement. So here we have select last name, first name, salary, from just the employee table, where we have a salary that is 75,000 or more. So we'll have greater than or equal to 75,000. And the last thing we want to do is order by salary in descending order. So we'll do order by salary descending. Let's run that and see the result. And you can see those employees that have, here's a case where we actually have equal to 75,000, and they are ordered in descending order. Going to comment this out, and we'll do the next one. Write a SQL statement that will show all employees who work in Georgia. Now here's a case for the first time that we have employee information as well as information from the location table. If we look back at our model, we can see how the tables are related. Here we have the location table, and we have a one-to-many connection with the employee table. So in order to go from the employee to the location table, what we're going to have to do is use the primary key foreign key connection. Let's walk through the first part of the query first, and then we'll see how this works. We want to display the last name, first name, and the city from the location table. We're going to need to pull this information from both the employee table as well as the location table. So we need to have both listed here. The next thing that we want to set is the criterion that we have employees who just work in Georgia. Now Georgia is a state, so we want to be careful here. We're displaying the city, but we want to set it equal to the state. So we'll have where state is equal to GA. And at this point, what I'm going to do is actually run it, even though we're not quite finished. So I run the query, and if you look at the results, if you look down here, you can see that we generated 23 rows. So the question is, do we have 23 employees that work in Atlanta? Easy way to check that is to look in the employee table because we don't have that much data. And if we scroll over and take a look at the location ID, we can see that we have a lot of varied places here. The more interesting thing is that when we pulled all the information from the employee table, we got 23 rows back. So what is going on here? We got 23 rows when we said state equals Georgia, and we also got 23 rows when we pulled all of the employee information. So it looks like instead of choosing specific employees that are matched with a location ID that corresponds to the state of Georgia, what MySQL has done is just returned all of the employees. If we run this again, you can see what MySQL has done is returned the first and last names of all of the employees, simply shoved together with the city of Atlanta. In other words, if we look back at the diagram here, MySQL was not told how to join these two tables together. What it should have been told is, well, check the location table. What is the location ID of the state of Georgia? Then when I go to the employee table, just pull the employee information where that foreign key has the value of this primary key over here. In order to let MySQL know that that's what you want to do, we have to add one more statement to the criteria. This is going to be what's called an implicit join. So we're going to add the following statement, where state equals Georgia, and what we're going to do is set the primary key in the location table equal to the foreign key in the employee table. And we'll do that by saying the table name first. So location ID is equal to the foreign key employee.location ID. So we've set the primary key equal to the foreign key. Let's rerun the query. Now you can see that we only have 4 records returned, and it's more likely that this is correct. If we want to be absolutely sure that this is correct, we can manually look, because this is a small data set, first at what the location ID for the state of Georgia is, which is 1. And we can then write a quick query. So what we'll do now is use that information to run a quick query in the employee table. Just select the last name from employee, where the location ID is equal to 1. Let's run this and see what happens. And sure enough, we get 4 records back. This is something that will take some practice, so I strongly recommend looking at the join practice that is on Blackboard. But again, the key here is that if we have to pull information from multiple tables, so you just have to look at the attributes to know where they're coming from, what we'll do is include both table names, and as one of the criteria, or more, depending upon how many joins we have, we set the primary key equal to the foreign key for whatever we'd like to join. So here, we're setting location ID equal to location ID. If we wanted to pull information from employee and position, we would have to do the same thing with position ID as primary key equals position ID as the foreign key. And as you'll see in one of the examples, if we want to pull information from all 3 tables, we have to have 2 separate statements, one setting the location IDs equal and one setting the position IDs equal. What we're doing here is a concept called inner join. So I'm going to comment this out, and let's keep going to see a couple more examples. Number 4, write a SQL statement that will show all the employees that have a last name that starts with A or M. Display last name, first name, and performance, and order by last name. Now this one doesn't have multiple tables, but it will demonstrate something else that is found in your knowledge check. So we have select last name, first name, and performance. From, we just need the employee table. So we have where last name starts with A or M. So we'll do where last name like, and we'll use our wildcard character. So the last name starts with, so we'll start with A and follow it up with the wildcard. Or last name like M%. And the last thing we need to do is order by last name. Now the default is ascending, so that's what we'll do here. If I run it, you see I get the results. Last name starts with A or M, as well as the performance, and it's ordered by last name. We did this query just to remind you about the wildcard character inside of a field, which is the %sign. All right, let's comment this out and move to the next query. Number 5, write a SQL statement that shows all the managers and the city where they are a manager. So here, notice that managers is lowercase. If we go to the position table, you can see that we have regular managers and we have regional managers. When manager is lowercase like this, it wants to pull either type, the regular managers or the regional managers. So we have to keep that in mind. Want to display the city, the first name, last name, position, title, and order by location city. So you have to ask yourself where the attributes are coming from. City's coming from the location table, and then the rest of the information is coming from the employee table and the position table. So we'll actually have to make 2 primary key equals foreign key statements here. So let's start with what we want to display. So select first the city, then the first name, the last name, and the title. In our from statement, we have to actually include all of the tables. So employee, position, location. The order doesn't matter as long as you have all 3 of them there. And then in our where clause, we first specify that we want managers or regional managers. Here we'll say where title equals manager or title equals regional manager. Now, because we are using all three tables, we have to set the primary key equal to the foreign key and the primary key equal to the foreign key. So 3 tables, we need 2 separate statements for our inner joins. So we'll say and location.location ID equals employee.location ID and position.position ID equals employee.position ID. The last thing we want to do is order by city. I had mentioned when you mix ors and ands, you have to be careful. So we have to be careful here. The and will act like multiplication and the or will act like addition. So following order of operations, anytime you have an and statement, it will get executed before the or statement. So to make sure that the ands get applied to both of these as a unit, we should enclose the or clause components with parentheses. And when we run that, you can see we get the following result. Here are the cities and first and last names matched up with the titles of all of the managers and the one regional manager. All right, I'm going to comment that out and let's move on to the next one. Number 6, write a SQL statement that shows the average salary of the employees in each location. So here we'll have a couple of things. First, we'll have to join because the average salary is something we'll have to get from the employee table, and the location city and ID we can get from the location table. And we also have a new concept here referred to as a totals query. So there are different totals types, including averages, minimums, maximums, counts, and sums. And so here we're going to see an average. So we start the statement off the same. We say select. We want to see the location ID. Now for location ID, because we're going to pull both the location and the employee table, we should specify that we're going to pull the location from one of the tables. It doesn't matter which. I'm going to pull it from the location table. So I'll say location.location ID, city, and then on average salary, we're going to do the following. We'll see a new keyword, AVG, and I'm going to put inside the parentheses the attribute of interest. So the attribute of interest here is salary from the employee table. And the other thing I'm going to do is give the result what's called an alias. So in other words, another name for it that it will display in the query results. In order to do this, I'm going to say as, and then give it a name. So for example, average salary, all one word. This information is coming from the location table and the employee table. So we'll say from location, comma, employee. And I actually don't have a where clause here because I'm not saying anything. I'm not constraining it in any way. But what I do need is a group by statement. So if I have a total and I have additional attributes, I need to indicate which attribute I want it to group on. You'll see what I mean when we see the results. So I'm going to say group by city, and let's run that and see what we get. Now I've actually made an important mistake here that I'd like you to see. If you take a look, you can see that the average salary is the same for all of the cities. What ended up happening here is that I didn't specify the primary key equals foreign key. So we need to do that in order to make sure that we get the correct data. So we need to add one where statement since we have 2 locations. And we'll say where location.location ID equals employee.location ID and rerun. And now you'll see that I have an average salary for each city. So it was able to join on the location and employee tables and average out the salary that came from the employee table. Again, the keys here are this keyword here, average, the attribute of interest, the alias, and then the group by statement that's grouping on the city. All right, let's comment this out. Number 7, write a SQL statement that shows how many employees work in the New York City and Denver locations. So this one's a little bit more complex. First of all, notice that it's asking how many. I mentioned that we have both count and sum. You may have worked with count and sum in Excel. Now the distinguishing factors between count and sum, count is talking about the number of records. Count deals with what is on the outside. It counts the number of total records returned. It doesn't matter what's inside of those records. The sum, on the other hand, takes the sum of the values inside. So if you're working in Excel, it's the same thing. If you take a sum of something, it takes the sum of the values inside the cells. The count would just count the number of cells that you have. The same thing applies here. So if we have a query that shows how many employees, we're going to want count. So let's start with our select portion, select city and total employees. So total employees is our alias for our count. So what we're going to do is say count. Now when you are counting the number of something, what you want to do is make sure that you're counting on something that will have a value. So think about which attribute must have a value. That's going to be a primary key in this case. So we want to count employees. So let's count the social security number of those employees and use the alias total employees. We're pulling data from the location table as well as the employee table. So we'll indicate that here from location and employee. Now we want employees that work in the New York City and Denver locations, and we'll also need to specify the join portion. In our where clause, let's actually start with the join portion. So what we're going to do is set the location ID in the location table equal to the location ID in the employee table. And from here, we can now address the New York City and Denver issue. So let's say and city equals New York City. Now, if we say and, it will try to pull data that equals at the same time New York City and Denver. So that's not going to work. We have to use an or statement. So New York City or city equals Denver. Now we are mixing ands and ors again, so we need to think about what's going to happen. Let me show you what happens if we run it this way. We get the total number of employees is 27. Now we saw earlier that we only have 23 employees, and it's actually only showing us the city of Denver. Let's put parentheses around the criteria that are in the or clause and run it again. Now you'll see that only New York City is displayed. So we're actually missing one item. We did not tell it to group by anything. When you have a total, like a count, a sum, or an average, we have to also indicate what you want to group on. So let's add a group by city statement and run one more time. And now you can see the correct solution. New York City, we have 4 total employees, and Denver, we have 2 employees. So again, we matched the total with an alias and included a group by statement. We set our primary key equal to our foreign key, and then had this other criteria that because it was an or, we encapsulated in parentheses. Take some time to walk through the example provided on Blackboard for more practice, and let me know if you have questions about implicit join.